Right, hi everyone. Today I'm just going to take you through some basics for throwing. Beginner's lesson really. So I've got a few tools in front of me. I've got my wire so that I can get my pot off the wheel. I've got a cloth to hand to make sure I can wipe my hands down. Sponge for my bucket. A metal rib. A wooden rib. And I like a nice straight-sided wooden rib with a bit of a point for a beginner's pot, just so that you can adjust if you need to. A wooden knife and a metal angled turning tool. Your pin tool. And I think I said metal rib, but metal rib. And I have got a piece of paper, and I'll show you what that will be for when I go to get my pot off my wheel. So I'm starting here with sort of just over a pound of clay. I want to start with a nice dry wheel, and I'm aiming to get this piece of clay in the middle of the wheel. So I'm going to sort of position my piece of clay in the middle, and I'm going to lift up and I'm going to splat down. So before I start doing anything, I want to check my position on the wheel. I want to make sure my stool is as close to the wheel as I can be, and I want myself to be tucked into the wheel. I want my legs around the pan. When we are leaning into the clay to move across the wheel, we're using our body, so I'm going to tuck my left elbow into my hip, and I'm going to use the front of my hand on the clay to push it across the wheel. So I'm going to be pushing in an opposite direction all the way through. So what I need to do is I need to tilt my pelvis so that my arm will move. Now if I'm far away from my wheel, I won't have much movement across the wheel. So I want to be nice and tucked in. I'm going to pop my wheel on now, and I'm going to make sure it's going round anti-clockwise. Yep, so all good. First thing I'm going to do now is make sure this is nice and sturdy on the wheel. If it hasn't quite gone to centre when you've thrown it down, just slide it. Don't be tempted to lift it up because you're going to break that seal. So now I can introduce some water. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tuck my elbow into my hip, bring the heel of my hand round to the front of the clay, and I'm just going to lean in a little bit and push down at the same time with my hand on top, my right hand on top, just to centre this bottom bit and make sure it's on the wheel. The clay's on the wheel and it's not moving around. So heel of my hand against the front of the clay, lean forward, push down on a medium speed wheel. Now I can go up onto full speed, and I'm going to cone up. So what I'm doing when I'm coning up is I'm putting the heels of my hand either side of this bit of clay as such. I'm going to tuck my hands around the clay, and then what I'm doing with my hands tucked around is I'm pushing my heels of my hand toward each other. That way it's going to make the clay rise upwards, and what I'm looking for is a cone shape. So both hands around the clay, heels of my hands on the side, wheel on not full speed, so put your wheel on full speed, take your foot off the pedal so you're not tempted to keep pushing or altering the speed. Hands around the clay, thumbs out the way so the clay's got somewhere to go, and squeeze. And you can see as I squeeze, it starts to rise. So squeeze and follow up. What I do want to avoid is getting this dip in the top. So I'm just going to cone that off a little bit, just gently before I squeeze the clay. So hands around the clay, squeeze and up. Squeeze at the bottom and follow that up. So you're looking for this cone shape. Once you've got that cone shape, we can cone down. So elbow again tucked into your hip, right hand, left hand sitting on around the clay, supporting at the top of the cone. Right hand comes on top. And you can see I'm using this fleshy part of my palm on the top here. So left hand around the clay supporting, right hand on top, and I'm going to push downwards, but it's not a straight down push, it's almost a bend the cone over So you're sort of pushing from this front edge here and pushing that cone over and down. And as it starts to get to the same width, I'm controlling this top edge with my left hand. Keep pushing down. This left hand is sitting against the clay, keeping it nice and centered. I'm leaning in as I'm pushing down to stop my hand from drifting out. So I want to stop my left hand from moving. So my hip is acting as an anchor to stop my hand from moving around. What you need to concentrate on is keeping your arms nice and still. If your arms are nice and still, then your clay will be nice and still. If my hand's bobbling around, I'm never going to centre my clay. So pushing down into my hand, and as it goes to centre, I lift upwards and come off of the clay. If I come off too quickly, you'll notice the clay will follow me around and then I'm off centre. So lean in and push down. I've also got my elbows down on my legs so that they are anchored. If I'm up here and I push down, you can see how quickly that clay goes out off centre. So you can see it's very off centre now. So elbow into my hip, heel of my hand to the front of the clay. Remember, I'm pushing across the clay. Lean in, push down, and you'll go to centre. Come off the clay nice and slowly. So now I've got a nice centered piece of clay. You can see my hands aren't wobbling around at all. So the next step is to drill down. So both thumbs together on top, a little push down. There's no pressure on the outside of this clay. I'm not stopping the clay from moving at all. I'm just pushing downwards, and it is a downward push, not an outward push. So we're just going down to start with, and we're going to push down until we think we've left 1 centimetre. So you need to keep adding water to your well to keep the clay moving. Push down. Once you think you've left 1 centimetre on the bottom, take your sponge, get the water out the middle. And a simple way to test how much you've got in the bottom of your pot is to take your pin tool, push it into the middle of the clay, push down until it touches the wheel, bring a finger to the base of the pot, pop your finger against the pin, a little bit of pressure, and lift up, and that will show you how much clay you've got in the bottom. So pin tool in, finger to the base, lift up. I've got about 1 centimetre, which is what I'm looking for, so that's good. I now need to get rid of that little pinprick in the bottom, so just bring my finger in and get rid of that. So I've gone down far enough, so now I want to open out. So I'm going to pop some water in that hole so the clay will move. I'm going to bring my right thumb in at 3 o'clock. So if you think about your piece of clay as a clock face, you've got 12, 3, 6, 9. I'm coming in at 3 o'clock, and I'm using this fleshy part of my thumb to pull the clay outwards and open this up. So it's a horizontal movement from at 3 o'clock, my thumb goes in, pulling outwards towards 3 o'clock. And I need to be moving quite slowly. I want my elbows down on my legs so my arms can't wobble around. If I start to wobble around in the middle of my clay, it's going to knock the clay off centre. So thumb in at 3 o'clock. I don't want to push downwards anymore, but I need to keep enough pressure on the bottom so it doesn't push me upwards. So thumb in at 3 o'clock and just stretching that clay. So you notice I'm moving nice and slowly. Open that out. Now when I open out, I don't want my opening to go beyond the original width of my piece of clay, because otherwise I'll be stretching it. So I don't want to stretch it across the base, so I come within 1 centimetre of that base. Once I've got my opening, I need to compress the bottom. If you don't compress the bottom, then what will happen is your pot will get cracks in the base. They're called S-cracks. So I come in with my middle finger at 3 o'clock, a little push down and work to the centre and back out again. And what I'm trying to do is just give a little bit of a push, a little bit of compression, just to straighten out that base and compress the clay. The wider you go, the more compression you need to do, because you need to make sure it's compressed entirely across the base. So I've got a nice flat base, nicely compressed. I can now start to lift, but before I do that, I'm just going to take both my hands, tuck it around the clay and just squeeze my hands in together a little bit just to straighten that wall so that we've got a bit more clay to lift. Now, before I start doing anything, it's important that I drop my speed. I need to be on a medium speed for lifting. So I'm going to bring that speed down. If I don't drop my speed, I'm going really fast, all of a sudden it will get out of control because the wheel's going too fast. I'm pushing outwards all the time. So we're going to do a one-handed lift to start with. It's called a bear claw lift. I use my middle finger. I don't like to use my index finger because you tend to pinch with your index finger. And what you want is a nice surface area against the wall of the pot. So I'm going to put my middle finger in at 6, bring my thumb in this groove that I've got here at 6 o'clock. So I'm sort of doing this effort. And then what I'm going to do is push my thumb. So I've got my right hand against my thumb. I'm going to push on my thumb and then just slowly work up. So you can do that at 3 o'clock as well, but you can see I'm tipping over. I don't want to be tipping off my seat. So it's ideally do it at 6 o'clock. Put another groove in the bottom. Finger in at 6 o'clock, thumb in that groove. I'm putting some pressure on my thumb to push inwards to make this bulge. And I need to keep my fingers under the bulge so that comes upwards and brings the clay from the bottom to the top. So let me just explain what I'm doing with pressure. My fingers are in the middle at 6 o'clock. My thumb's in that groove. I do a small squeeze towards my fingers on the inside. So the pressure's not coming from the inside to the outside, but from the outside to the inside. These inside fingers are stopping that wall from moving in. So it's a small squeeze which will create this bulge of clay above your fingers. And then you want to support that thumb so it doesn't bobble around as you're lifting, and slowly bring that piece of clay. So keep your fingers underneath. So it's one squeeze at the bottom and then slowly come up. But make sure that piece of clay is sitting above your fingers all the way to the top. So I'm just going to do another lift. So fingers in the middle, thumb in that groove, a small squeeze. You can see that bulge get bigger. And then just slowly, and I need to be moving slower than the wheel so that the wheel does a full rotation for every movement up. Otherwise it will twist. When I get to the top, I want to let go of the clay by opening my fingers and coming off the top. If I slip off the top, what you can see is you get this twist because the clay will twist. If you're going too fast, the clay will actually twist. So to get rid of that twist now, what I've done is I put a finger on the inside, thumb on the outside, compress the clay to get rid of that twist. Tuck in if I've come out, go for another lift. I've still got some clay in there. Now this is slightly too tall for me now to do the bear claw. I can't get my thumb in the bottom of the pot. So I'm going to do a two-handed lift. Same principle. I put my middle finger in, but it's come slightly away from 6 o'clock and head in towards 4. So my fingers are going on the inside against the wall, and I'm going to make a point hook, and I'm going to use this fleshy part of my finger to actually substitute for my thumb. So my thumb previously was sitting in the groove. Now this fleshy part here is going to sit in the groove, and this part of my finger here, this straight edge, is going to sit against the pot. So finger in that groove, straight edge of my finger against the pot, a little squeeze at the bottom, and then slowly working up. What you'll notice is I've connected both my hands. I want to make sure I'm going to come up at the same speed with both hands. And the easiest way to do that is to connect in some way. So someone described it once as holding hands with yourself. So I thought that was quite a nice way to describe it. So make sure that you're connected. If you're not, you're going to be doing this all the way up. So make sure you're connected in some way, either thumb or whatever it is that's comfortable for you. Okay, so I'm happy with that now. I've probably lifted that as far as I want to. So I'm just going to tuck that in. I'm going to make sure my top's nice and level. If it's not, I'm going to cut a slice of clay off the top to make it level. This will help when you come to trim your pot. So if you're going to turn your pots upside down for trimming, then you do need to make sure your top's nice and level, otherwise you just get a wonky foot in the bottom of your pot. So the easiest way I have is using my pin tool. So I want my pin tool in my hand, I want my finger to the base of the pin, I want to leave enough to get through my clay. If I'm here, I'm going to hit the wall of my pot before I'm even through. So make sure I leave enough of the actual pin part to get through the clay. I've got a nice wet hand. I want my finger sitting against the wall on the inside. My needle tool, my pin tool, comes to the edge. I'm going in with the pointy bit, but I'm arcing through rather than pushing inwards. So I come in just below the lowest point of wherever it's not level and push inwards and let the wheel do the work. Just slowly. As the pin tool touches your finger on the inside, you can lift up and take your piece of clay off. So you're sitting there going through the clay. As soon as your pin tool hits your finger, you can lift that bit of clay off the top. So what's happened now is it's slightly messy and a bit tatty on the top. So wheel on, get some water on your finger and just smooth that off. If it seems a little bit thicker, which it might be as you pin down, you can just come in to the top bit, make sure you're connected. So as I said, when we lift with two hands, you can use your fingers just to squeeze that a little bit and make that a little bit thinner. So you're just lifting the top part. Next thing I want to do is get my water out the middle. So I'm using my sponge to go in, get the water out the middle. I want to tidy up my wheel. Now I'm going to bring my wooden rib in and I'm just going to straighten the sides of my pot and just give them a final compression. So wooden tool sitting on the outside of the pot. My fingers are in at the bottom of the pot and then they're going to slowly work up, leaving the wooden tool where it is. So, and I'm just leaning the clay towards the rib. Sometimes your fingers dry out, so just make sure that you keep nice wet hands coming to the top. That will straighten the wall and get rid of some of the slip or all of the slip. What that's meant is I've added some water into my pot again, so I want to get rid of that. If I've still got slip on the outside, I can use my metal rib. You sort of want to bend your rib so that it's not straight going in, just so you've got a slight curve, and come against it at a slight angle rather than straight on. And you want to just, you're not doing anything on the inside, but you're just coming in and getting rid of any slip on the outside of your pot. So, got all my slip off. What next thing I want to do is I want to just put a bevel in the bottom so that I can get my fingers in to lift this off the wheel. So using my wooden knife, medium speed, I'm using the pointed part of my wooden knife and I'm going to go in about 1 centimetre high. I hold it like a pencil as if I was going to write. I'm holding on, you'll notice, with both hands because the wheel will drag you around. So pointy part of my wooden rib in at the edge. And then just slowly push downwards towards the centre, so a slight angle until you hear the wheel. When you hear the wheel, you want to come out the way you went in. What that's done is that's left me with a donut of clay around the bottom that's stuck to the wheel, obviously, so I need to release that. So come in with your pin tool and just make sure you're supporting again, you know, pop a finger on top of the pin, it keeps it nice and steady. Come under that bit of clay and you should be able to cut that and release that bit of clay. Then you can either use the flat side of your wooden rib just to tidy that up, or if you want to, you can use your turning tool and you're using this straight edge just to come up against the pot just to tidy that. You can also use the flat of your wooden rib just to clear any clay off the wheel. You want to make sure we've got any slip off the wheel as well. Just tidy the top again if you need to, if you've got anything on there that you want to get rid of. Right, I'm ready to get this off. So what we're going to do is I'm going to float this off the wheel. So I'm going to put some water behind my pot. I'm going to come in with my wire. I'm going to make sure I've got some pressure pulling my wire out without hurting my fingers, so make sure you don't do it too tight. Thumbs on top. Thumbs on top, you want to leave enough wire to get through. Just caught that somehow. Let me just tidy that up. So, water behind my pot. Wire nice and tight, pulling outwards, and my thumbs on top so it doesn't lift upwards. So my thumbs are going to be on top all the way through. And I want to come through reasonably quickly. And I want to pull a layer of water through with my wire. So that will then allow me to push my pot off the bed of clay that's left behind without it sticking back down. So, wire nice and level, thumbs on top, pull through, pop your wire down and just slightly push at the base where it's got enough support, and that way I can lift that up and pop that onto the wheel, onto the board. Lift up and onto the board. Get rid of that bed of clay and tidy the wheel and go again. Now, I mentioned this bit of paper, didn't I? If when you've got your pot on the wheel before you wire through, if you put a little bit of water around the rim of your pot and place the paper on top and just make sure it's sealed all the way around, you can see there that's sealed with the water. Then when you wire through, that air inside is captured and it stops the walls from moving around because there's air inside. And that way it'll stop the walls from bending inwards. So that's another way. So you want to put your paper on top, then wire through, take your pot off, and you can even leave your piece of paper on top if you want to, and whilst it's drying. But if you do want to take it off, just make sure you slowly take the paper off, otherwise you'll rip the clay as well. And that's a couple of little tips on how to throw a small cylinder